Hello, I'm Bud McCord. I'm here in Brazil, South America. Welcome to Food for Thought. We're walking through the words of John's Gospel. We're seeing Jesus, hearing Jesus, learning to love Jesus so that we can live Jesus. We are disciples. And that is the process that Jesus used to disciple his first disciples. We're going to be back in chapter 7, or beginning chapter 7 today. And a couple of thoughts have come to me over the weekend. We had a wonderful weekend here in the city of São José dos Campos. We started together with a campus of the Memorial Baptist Church in the city of São Paulo. It's like a congregation from that church. We started our public services last year at this time, and we celebrated 1 year of this community here in São José dos Campos, where I'm one of the pastors on the team, and we're planning this church. We had 3 services yesterday. We had about 350 people that attended the services. It's an amazing time in Brazil, wonderful time to plant churches and to disciple people. But a couple of things really came to my attention, and part of it is because we've been walking in the words of John's Gospel. First of all, there's nothing easy about discipling people. There's nothing easy about leading people to Jesus or taking people to Jesus and helping them to learn that he is sufficient and that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except by him. It is not an easy thing to work in this thing of discipleship. But the reason I'm bringing that up is to say this. At this point in the reading of John's Gospel, it is incredibly clear that Jesus Christ suffered to spend these 3.5 years with these disciples. He suffered with them very deeply because to do this kind of work for 3.5 years and to live in this world as a human being was not easy for him at any time. You know, sometimes we see all these films about superheroes, and sometimes I think, oh, well, Jesus, he did everything he did because he was a superhero. That is really to miss the point. He did not come as a superhero, he came as a servant. And when you see the kind of abuse that he endured, and when you see the kind of trouble that he faced in order to walk through this path of the plan of God for his life, it's very, very clear that it was very difficult for him. But he overcame the world, and he did that for us. Sometimes when I'm in a retreat with leaders and I talk about what it means to be a disciple, I will ask a question, and that question is, how many of you really believe that the Father, Jesus' Father, deeply loved his Son, Jesus? And the answer for any group of Christians is universally, oh yes, the Father loved Jesus. He loved him deeply. They were committed to one another. They were one. And then I ask another question. Oh good, since you believe that the Father loved Jesus, would you want to be treated the way Jesus was treated? Or the way his Father allowed him to be treated? Or the way that the Father stood by, in a sense, and watched him suffer, because that was the plan? The room gets really quiet. The reason it gets quiet is because we have this idea in our mind about discipleship that it's going to be easy. There's nothing easy about what Jesus asks us to do. But when you compare the alternative of living without meaning, living with constant thirst for meaning and identity and purpose in life, when you consider how hard it is to be a human being without Jesus, then you can say, well, you know, no matter what the difficulty is about being a disciple, it is so much better and so much lighter to carry than it is to be lost in the darkness, to be continually running after something that satisfies us, to always be hunger for affirmation. So I can say on both sides, it is not easy to be a disciple of Jesus in this world. In the world we have tribulations. But he said, be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. It is not easy, and it wasn't easy for Jesus. So with that thought in mind, let me read the first part of chapter 7, and I just would like to point out and have you notice how the difficulties that Jesus faced in order to walk in the world and show us grace and truth at the same time. And I think you'll get an idea of what I'm trying to get at is that even though it's hard to be a disciple, it is the right path. And even though it is not an easy path, it is a narrow path, but still, when you put it up against what the alternative is, this is the path. After these things, beginning in verse 1, after these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea because the Jews sought to kill him, the Jewish authorities. Now the Jews' feast of tabernacles was at hand. His brothers, now these are Jesus's flesh and blood brothers, they were born of Mary and Joseph. His brothers therefore said to him, depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For even his brothers did not believe in him. That's the suffering. Even his brothers did not believe in him. Sometimes your flesh and blood family can have doubts about you. I'm not saying they don't love you. And I'm not saying they didn't love Jesus. It's just simply that they were ready to send him into Jerusalem and get this thing over with. You know, some people have joked, everybody has an opinion. It's like a nose. Everybody has a nose. So everybody has an opinion. Well, your family's opinion about you is impactful to you. And so here you see a kind of suffering that goes along with Jesus. They wanted him just to go to Jerusalem and come out in the open with whatever it is he was going to do. They were tired of this thing of having to live with the reputation of their brother. I mean, sometimes that can be the way things are in our lives. Then Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it, that its works are evil. You go up to this feast, and I am not yet going up to the feast, for my time has not yet fully come. So Jesus was not avoiding any pain. It just wasn't the right moment for this public explosion that would later on take place. When he had said these things to them, he remained in Galilee. But when his brothers had gone up, then he also went up to the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. Then the Jews, again the authorities, sought him at the feast and said, where is he? And there was much complaining among the people concerning him. Some people said he is good. Others said, no, on the contrary, he deceives people. However, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews. This was before Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But it's the same kind of thing. It's like everybody is trying to have an opinion and judging Jesus. That's pressure. That's a lot of pressure. Now he goes on and says, now about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and taught. And the Jews marveled, saying, how does this man know letters, having never studied? Jesus answered them and said, my doctrine is not mine, but at his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, now this is the key to theological growth. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. This is an incredibly important thing for every disciple to understand. If you want to understand true theology, want to do the will of God. The point of studying theology, according to Jesus, is so you can do the will of God, not so you can be smarter than everybody else. Because a lot of times people start study theology as an end. I just want to study theology. I just want to know everything. I want to know everything. And they have very little concern about the reason theology exists is so that we can better do the will of God. Jesus goes on, he says, he who speaks from himself seeks his own glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keeps the law? Why do you seek to kill me?" The people answered and said, "You have a demon." Wow, your own family doesn't believe in you. People are wanting you to explain yourself and explain yourself. And then in a group, somebody cries out, "You've got a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" You're imagining all this persecution, Jesus. Jesus answered to them, "I did one work." I think he's talking about that cure of the man at the pool of Bethesda. "And you all marvel. Moses, therefore, gave you circumcision, not that it was from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath? Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." We who live in these days of Twitter and Facebook, and it's amazing. People are cruel. People are vindictive, and people judge without having any background from what they're saying. I think there's something in all of us that has this kind of a wrong way of behaving, but wow, when you're on the receiving end of it, it is really devastating. Now, we're watching Jesus disciple his disciples, so every time Jesus is attacked, his disciples are watching it, so that they're learning from Jesus. What do you do when even your family doesn't believe in you? What do you do when everybody is telling you what you should do, but God's will seems to be something completely opposite? What do you do when people are saying you're crazy, or you're a demon, you have a demon? What do you do? And I think the lesson that comes to me this morning, and as a guide through here, I just want to maybe raise this thought for you. I think just keep doing the will of God, but be sure it is the will of God. And the only way you're going to know the real will of God is for you to want the will of God. And as you want the will of God and you desire the will of God, then God, through the Holy Spirit, allows you to perceive what the will of God is. And once you've determined what the will of God is, then just keep going one day at a time. The way I would define success for a disciple is to love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's the simplicity of what Jesus said, but that requires a tremendous amount of understanding that is the will of God. And so everything Jesus does here is full of grace and truth. But just picture this, he's walking in the will of God, and out of nowhere comes unbelief about who he is, people criticizing for what he did, people criticizing for what he didn't do. And, when he's trying to help somebody get healed, people are saying, well, you shouldn't even help that person. They don't deserve it, or whatever. This sound familiar to you? Does this sound familiar to you? If you have ever been in a place where all you're trying to do is do good, then I think trying to do the will of God, I think that you've taken these kinds of blows as well. But remember this, Jesus, who never sinned, and we're all sinners, he kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going until he was alone on the cross. And then he felt that the Father had left him. It was that serious. But the Father hadn't left him, because it was the Father's plan from the very beginning that he end up on that cross. And the disciples were watching this. They saw him, they heard him, they learned to love him, and then they learned to live him. And out of this group of 12, 10 of them became martyrs, and 1 died in exile. That's how the beginning of the church is told. Very interesting, isn't it? I hope you'll go back and read this. Remember that it is not easy to be a disciple, but the alternative is much worse. And that's why Jesus said that his burden is not heavy, and he didn't put on you more. He's actually allowing you to go in the direction of the will of God as a disciple. Have a great day, and may God bless you as you journey on the path of the will of God in Jesus Christ. Have a great day.